Sometimes the soul gets so tired that all you want to do is get in your Supra, turn on your favorite song, and silently drive off into the sunset. If I asked you to name the Toyota Supra, you'd probably picture this one: an orange coupe, a massive rear wing, an inline six, and the legendary 2JZ. For most people, that's where the story of the Supra begins, and that's also where the biggest misconception begins. Almost everything that made the Supra an icon came much later. It wasn't born a legend. It wasn't born the fastest. It wasn't born as the car everyone dreamed of owning. And most surprisingly, Toyota never intended to create an automotive icon. The truth is, the story of the Supra doesn't begin with the 2JZ. It doesn't even begin with a turbocharger. It begins with a problem. In the mid-1970s, Toyota found itself in an awkward position. On one side, there was the Celica, an affordable sports coupe. On the other, more expensive Grand Tourers from European manufacturers. Between them, there was a gap, and that was exactly the gap Toyota set out to fill. Not to build a supercar, but to offer buyers a more comfortable, more powerful, and more prestigious car for long-distance driving. In 1978, the Celica Supra was introduced. In Japan, it carried a different name, Celica 20. And here's an important detail: the name Supra didn't even stand on its own. It was simply an extension of the Celica name. Back then, no one could have imagined that one day the word Celica would fade into the background, while Supra would become famous all over the world. But here's what makes the story truly interesting. Toyota didn't create an entirely new car from scratch. The engineers took the existing Celica. They extended the front end so they could fit an inline six-cylinder engine under the hood. That single decision shaped the future of the Supra. Not its design, not its power, but the decision to use an inline six. It would eventually become the heart of every classic Supra generation. And even after that, no one was talking about a legend. The car received positive reviews. It was praised for its smooth ride, its comfort, its reliability. But almost nobody said, this is the car that will change automotive history, because it hadn't done that yet. And that raises an important question. How did a car that wasn't even its own model become a symbol of the Japanese automotive industry just 20 years later? Why the Supra and not one of Toyota's many other sports cars? And why do most people remember it today so differently from what it actually was? To answer those questions, we have to go back to a time when Toyota didn't even realize it was building a future legend. Because the most important part of the Supra's story isn't how it was born, it's the fact that it became a legend almost by accident. At the end of the 1970s, Toyota believed it had found the perfect formula. The Celica Supra was selling well. Customers appreciated it for exactly what it was meant to be: fast, comfortable, a reliable car for long-distance driving. That was exactly what Toyota had set out to build, nothing more. And that's what makes the next question so interesting. If the company had already built the car it wanted, why didn't it stop there? Why did it continue investing more and more into the Supra? The answer isn't found inside Toyota, it's found in Japan. At the beginning of the 1980s, Japan was experiencing an extraordinary economic boom. Automakers were growing richer at an incredible pace, and for the first time in decades, they stopped trying to catch up with the rest of the world. They wanted to lead it. Nissan, Mazda, Honda, Mitsubishi. Every company wanted to build a car that would prove one thing: Japan was no longer copying the world. Japan was setting the standard. This quiet rivalry never made the front pages of newspapers, but it would permanently change the Japanese automotive industry. Toyota couldn't afford to stay on the sidelines. Its engineers began asking a question that would have sounded strange just a few years earlier. What if the Supra could be more than just a comfortable coupe? It was a dangerous idea because it required completely rethinking the car's philosophy. In 1981, the second-generation Celica Supra arrived. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than an evolution. Sharper body lines, pop-up headlights, a more modern interior. But the real changes were happening where most people never looked. Toyota began paying far more attention to the way the car behaved on the road. The suspension was refined, the chassis geometry was redesigned, the steering became more precise. The car felt more confident through high-speed corners. For the first time, journalists began saying that the Supra delivered genuine driving enjoyment, not just comfort. And that was the biggest change of all. Toyota was no longer building just another grand tourer. It was beginning to build a car for people who truly loved driving. But there was one problem, a very serious problem. Despite all the improvements, the Supra was still living in another car's shadow. The badge still read Celica Supra, as if it still hadn't earned the right to have its own identity. And the longer the engineers worked on the car, the more they realized it was no longer a Celica. It was becoming longer, more powerful, more expensive, more ambitious. Customers were no longer comparing it to other versions of the Celica. They were comparing it to the Nissan 280ZX, the Mazda RX-7, and even some European Grand Tourers. That could only mean one thing. The Supra was already playing in a different league, even if Toyota wasn't ready to admit it yet. Inside the company, a decision was beginning to take shape. If the Supra wanted to compete with the very best, it could no longer remain the Celica's bigger sister. It needed its own story, its own identity, its own name. But with freedom comes responsibility. Because if the next Supra failed, there would be no one else left to blame. In 1986, Toyota made the decision that would change the model's history forever. For the first time, the word Celica disappeared from the car. Only one name remained: Supra. That was the moment the car we know today was truly born. But with its new identity, Toyota also inherited a new problem. Now the company had to prove to the world that the Supra deserved to stand alongside the greatest sports cars on the planet. And that attempt would lead to the biggest engineering mistake in the model's history. 1986. After spending nearly 8 years living in the Celica's shadow, Toyota finally made the move its engineers had been waiting for. The name Celica disappeared. Only one word remained: Supra. For most buyers, it was just a new badge. For Toyota, it was a massive gamble. Now, if the car failed, there would be no one else to blame. And Toyota truly took that risk. The new Supra was bigger, faster, more expensive. It introduced new technology, more advanced electronics, more powerful engines. Toyota was no longer trying to build just a comfortable coupe. It openly challenged Nissan, Mazda, and even some European manufacturers. For the first time, the Supra had to prove that it deserved to stand on its own. And for a while, everything seemed to be going according to plan. The car received positive reviews. Journalists praised its high-speed stability, its comfort, its equipment. The new turbocharged 7M GTE looked exactly like the heart of a modern Japanese sports car should. 3 liters, an inline 6, a turbocharger. Everything was in place for success. And then, the strange stories began. First one, then a few more, then dozens. Owners started reporting overheating, coolant loss, white smoke, falling compression, and almost every symptom pointed to the same conclusion: the head gasket. At first, many believed it was just a bad batch. Then they blamed poor maintenance. But the problem never went away. And eventually, it became clear. This wasn't a coincidence. The strangest part was that the engine itself was incredibly strong. A cast iron block, a robust design, exceptional durability. Many engines, once properly repaired, went on to cover hundreds of thousands of additional kilometers without issue. So why did it earn such a bad reputation? One of the most widely accepted explanations among specialists is that the factory head bolts were torqued to a specification that proved insufficient for long-term operation under high loads. As the engine repeatedly heated up and cooled down, the seal between the cylinder head and the engine block could gradually lose its integrity. That didn't mean every 7M GTE was doomed to fail, but it was enough to seriously damage the engine's reputation. And that's where Toyota learned a very expensive lesson. People don't remember hundreds of brilliant engineering decisions. They remember one problem. Sometimes, that's enough to change a car's history forever. It seemed the Supra had taken a step forward, but instead, it had inherited a burden it would carry for years. Now the engineers faced a different challenge, not how to build a new engine, but how to win back people's trust. That was the moment Toyota began developing an entirely new generation of inline-six engines, a project designed to correct the mistakes of the past, and to create an engine that would never again be remembered for a fatal weakness. But there's one detail that almost nobody talks about. When that engine was finally ready, Toyota didn't even put it in the Supra. Sometimes, the greatest legends are born by accident. And that's exactly what happened with the 2JZ. Today, even people who know almost nothing about cars have heard its name. To some, it's the strongest production engine ever built. To others, it's the ultimate symbol of Japanese engineering. But very few people stop to ask one simple question. Why did Toyota build this engine in the first place? And the answer might surprise you. After everything that happened with the 7M, Toyota's engineers understood one thing perfectly. The next engine couldn't just be more powerful, it had to win back people's trust. But if you think they were told to build an engine that would break world records, you're mistaken. Their goal was far more practical: to build a modern inline-six for Toyota's high-performance rear-wheel drive cars. Reliable, quiet, smooth, and capable of lasting for hundreds of thousands of miles. That's how the story of the JZ family began. First came the 1JZ, then the larger 2JZ. At first, it looked like nothing more than a normal evolution. New technology, greater efficiency, a stronger engine design. Nothing magical, no bold promises. Toyota was simply doing what it did best: designing an engine with an enormous margin of reliability. And this is where something happened that almost nobody talks about. When the 2JZ GTE was finally ready, its first home wasn't the Supra. It was the Toyota Aristo luxury sedan. Yes, the engine the entire world now calls the heart of the Supra first lived under the hood of a four-door luxury car. And that completely destroys one of the biggest myths. Toyota didn't build the 2JZ specifically for the Supra. It built a flagship engine that could be used across multiple models. The Supra simply became the car that revealed its true potential. When the new engine finally arrived in the A80 Supra, nobody was talking about 1,000 horsepower. Nobody was talking about drag racing. Nobody was dreaming about world records. Buyers simply saw a very fast sports car, and that was enough. But somewhere far away from Toyota's headquarters, the experiments began. Small tuning shops, racing teams, passionate enthusiasts. At first, they raised the boost pressure just a little. Then they installed bigger turbochargers. Then they upgraded the fuel system. And every single time, they waited for the engine to finally say, "That's enough." But it almost never did. The more they demanded from the 2JZ, the more it amazed them. It survived loads that would have destroyed many other production engines of its era. That's when the legends began. Toyota hid its true power. The engineers secretly built it to handle 1,000 horsepower. They knew it would become the greatest. They're incredible stories, but there's no documented evidence that any of them are true. The reality was probably much simpler. Toyota simply built an exceptionally strong production engine. Everything that came after was discovered by people outside the factory. And that's exactly what makes the story of the 2JZ so special. Its legend wasn't written by Toyota's engineers. It was written by racers, mechanics, tuners, and hundreds of thousands of owners around the world. Without them, the 2JZ would probably have been remembered as just another great Toyota engine. And then, something remarkable happened. People stopped talking about the Supra. They started talking about the 2JZ Supra, as if the engine had become even more famous than the car itself. That almost never happens. Usually, the car makes the engine legendary. This time, the engine became a legend on its own. And yet, even that wasn't enough. Outside Japan, the Supra was still far from a global icon. There were no endless waiting lists, no worldwide cult following, no millions of devoted fans. For that, it would take a force Toyota could never control: movies, video games, and the people who would make the Supra immortal. By the mid-1990s, Toyota had finally built the car it had been chasing for nearly 20 years. The new Supra was fast, advanced, reliable, and it was powered by an engine that was steadily earning the respect of enthusiasts around the world. It seemed its moment had finally arrived, but reality turned out to be very different. Sales were solid, but they weren't extraordinary. The Supra wasn't selling in huge numbers. It didn't dominate the competition. It didn't change the automotive industry, and it certainly didn't look like a future global icon. If the story had ended right there, there's a good chance we'd remember the Supra today as simply another great Japanese sports car from the 1990s. But the story was only just beginning. In 2002, Toyota ended production of the Supra. It looked like the end. The car disappeared from dealerships. No more new Supras would ever be built. And that's exactly when something happened that almost defied the rules of the automotive business. The Supra's popularity started to grow. Just as Toyota stopped building it, the rest of the world was only beginning to discover it. And the people responsible weren't Toyota's engineers. It was popular culture. In 1997, Gran Turismo arrived on the PlayStation. For millions of kids, it was the first chance to drive a car they had never seen in real life. Then came Need for Speed. And once again, the Supra became one of the cars everyone wanted. Not because it was the most expensive, but because you could make it faster, better, your own. Those games introduced an entire generation to the world of Japanese sports cars. Then came 2001. The Fast and the Furious hit theaters, and within just a few minutes of screen time, everything changed. Brian O'Connor's orange Supra became one of the most famous movie cars of all time. Millions of people who had never cared about Japanese performance cars suddenly wanted one. But the most interesting part wasn't that. The movie didn't make the Supra any faster. It didn't make it technically better. It did something far more powerful. It gave the Supra a story. From that moment on, it was no longer just a car. It became a dream. At the very same time, another legend was being created in Japan. Smoky Nagata, top secret, high-speed runs under the cover of night, cars that shattered everything people thought was possible for a production automobile. Every new video, every magazine article, every speed record only made the Supra's reputation even stronger. And suddenly, something happened that Toyota had never planned. The legend was no longer being built by engineers. It was being built by owners, tuners, racing teams, filmmakers, video game developers, and millions of fans around the world. Toyota was no longer in control of its own car, and that raises a fascinating question. Would the Supra still have become a legend without Fast and Furious? Without Gran Turismo? Without Need for Speed? Maybe, but it almost certainly wouldn't be the legend we know today. Popular culture didn't create the Supra, but it transformed it into a global icon. And here's the irony. By the time the Supra reached the peak of its popularity, Toyota wasn't building a single new one. Every year, fewer cars remained. Some were crashed, some were transformed into race cars, some disappeared forever. Yet the number of people who wanted one kept growing. The laws of supply and demand were ruthless. Fewer cars, more buyers, higher prices. A model that had never been a massive commercial success was suddenly worth more than many modern supercars. And that's when Toyota realized something important. It no longer owned the Supra. Its story belonged to the world. Only one question remained. Can you bring back a legend that you no longer control? The answer to that question would lead Toyota to the most controversial decision in the Supra's history: a partnership with BMW. The Supra was no longer just transportation, it had become history. Toyota saw all of it and understood perfectly. If the company ever brought the Supra back, people wouldn't compare it to its competitors, they would compare it to their memories. And memories are almost impossible to surpass. 17 years passed. In 2019, the Supra returned, and before the first cars had even reached their owners, the controversy had already divided the automotive world. Some said, "Finally, it's back." Others replied, "This isn't a Supra anymore." Everyone knew the reason. The new car had been developed together with BMW. It used a shared platform, a shared architecture, and BMW's B58 inline-6 engine. To many fans, it felt like betrayal. But history is never that simple. By that point, developing an entirely new sports car alone would have cost billions of dollars. The market for two-seat sports coupes was nothing like it had been in the 1990s. Toyota faced a choice, not between building the perfect Supra and building a compromised one. The choice was simpler: bring it back with a partner or never bring it back at all. Toyota chose the first option. And that brings us to the most important question in this entire story. What makes a Supra a Supra? The engine? The body? The badge? The country where it was built? Or perhaps the people who spent decades placing their own dreams into that name? Because the truth is, a legend is never created by a factory alone. It's created by thousands of stories. The first owner driving away from the dealership, the mechanic who spent a lifetime rebuilding JZ engines, the racer who risked everything for a single record, the kid who spent countless hours playing Gran Turismo, the child who watched The Fast and the Furious and fell in love with cars for the very first time. All of them built the legend together. That's why Toyota eventually lost control of the Supra, not because it lost the rights to the name, not because it stopped building the car, but because the word Supra no longer belonged only to Toyota. It had become part of automotive culture, and perhaps that's the highest level of success any car can ever achieve. When people no longer love it because of the numbers, not because of the horsepower, not because of the acceleration, but because of the way it makes them feel. Just think about it. In 1978, Toyota simply wanted to fill the gap between the Celica and more expensive Grand Tourers. Nobody was talking about immortality. Nobody was talking about a cult following. Nobody was talking about a legend. And yet, decades later, one short word is known by millions of people around the world: Supra. Maybe that is the best definition of a legend. A legend isn't the car that was the fastest, it isn't the car that sold the most, and it isn't even the car with the greatest engine. A legend is a car people continue to remember long after the factory has stopped building it.